I'm Schamet Horsfield, and I'm so excited to bring you two of my favorite people, Anodea Judith, an expert on the chakra system, and Lion Goodman, an expert at beliefs. They're two people that I trust 100%, and they're two people that I respect very much. They're masters in their field, they're experts at their field, and I feel that they embody the sacred feminine and the sacred masculine, which is something we're needing a lot of during this time. I had them come on. I asked them to come on because there's a lot going on the planet. And I know for me personally, I really jumped into kind of a dark place, a rabbit hole of conspiracy theory stuff, because I'm the kind of person that likes to look to the right, to the left, on the fringe, and know everything about everything so that I can make the best informed decision about what's going on and my personal truth, so I can move forward in a really beautiful and powerful way. So there's a lot going on, and I kind of spun out personally, and Anodea last week kind of helped me ground down. So thank you, Anodea. And so I asked Anodea and Lion to come on today and just answer a couple questions that I have. And so actually I'll ask Lion the first question, and that is, since you're an expert at beliefs, and there's a lot of different beliefs going on, what do you feel about all these conspiracy theories?
First, we need to look at the word conspiracy, right? It comes from the Latin meaning to breathe together. So anytime two people are breathing together or sharing their ideas, you could call it a conspiracy. Now, conspiracy theories, the term conspiracy theory was brought in about 20 years ago to discount people who believed certain things were happening. And so it's become kind of an epithet, right? It's like, oh, it's just a conspiracy theory. It's a discounting of what other people might say are facts or theories. So a theory is basically a proposition. It's like, we think this is happening. And then if you're going to think critically, then you need to search for evidence, corroboration, you need to verify it, right? It's not just a belief. So the scientific method of inquiry was brought in, hundreds of years ago to counter religious belief and rumor and wild ideas about God and life and what the rules are that you have to follow. And we've been battling with religious belief for hundreds of years, probably thousands of years, actually, if you go back to Roman days. And yet, not everyone thinks scientifically, and not everyone thinks critically. And because we're now in an environment where information is swirling around us at a very rapid pace, we actually don't have time to go and check and verify to see whether what someone said is true or not. So it would be great if we were thinking critically about these things, but there's lots of cognitive biases. Those are the inherent biases we have in our mind. So for example, there's confirmation bias. This is the best known, which is that if you believe it, you tend to see it in the world. You tend to verify your own beliefs, no matter what they are. So someone who doesn't believe in conspiracy theories would say, oh, that's just BS, right? And someone who is a believer finds evidence, more and more evidence for it. So the real question is, how do we know what's true? And how do we find out what's true for us? Because you can count on your heart, right? You can feel your heart and experience what's in your heart. You can count on your experience, your direct experience. You just hurt me. Okay, that is a real truthful experience. You get to say what's true for you. Everything outside that realm is speculation. And in some languages, there's a particular form of a word that you use to determine whether it's my experience, what someone else told me was their experience, or what someone else told me they heard someone else experience. So there's different levels of distance from the authentic experience. And with so much information today and so many people, putting their ideas out on the internet, it's very, very difficult to swim through that pool of information and ideas. However, if you take a critical thinking approach, then you say, well, it might be true. Let's look for corroboration and evidence. And so you search through a mound of data and you find the ones that are most verifying of that idea. The problem is we don't have much time to do that these days. So anything that anyone says on the internet seems like it might be true. And if you have certain other biases, for example, a bias against big organizations, which is fairly common for people in my community, then anything they say, you put more doubt on. And anything someone else says that's outside of the big organizations, you put more value or truth value on. We could say that there's a scale of believability from 100%, which would be absolutely true, verified, and double checked, and 0, which would be total BS. And we can put a fact, what someone else calls a fact, anywhere on that line. We have to have our own scale so we know what am I going to believe in? What am I going to trust? And trust is tricky these days because everybody's saying everything. So you have to examine your own biases and see what's true for you. How does it impact me if it were true? Am I going to change my life knowing that that's occurred? Maybe, maybe not. So we have to sort of bring it into our own truthful selves here. And then if it's out there, we need to, don't trust, verify in critical thinking. That's a first go at answering your question.
I would add just one little thing in there that it made me think of is that if people have a bias against corporations, for example, and then there's some kind of theory, conspiracy theory or not, that comes along that corroborates that the corporations are bad, they're also more likely to adopt that belief.
Right.
Like the coronavirus was manufactured by a corporation to make money on the vaccine or something.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and the other important fact is there's an old saying that even paranoids have some real enemies, right? So just because it's a conspiracy theory or it's called a conspiracy theory doesn't mean it's not true, right? So it really requires a lot of in-depth thinking, and most people don't have the time or the energy to do that kind of critical thinking.
Right. So I got really alarmed because the one of the conspiracy theories is that the actual coronavirus is not even real, and it's one of them. And I think there's something killing hundreds of thousands of people. If it's not the coronavirus, you have to determine what it is. Right. If people actually are dying, there is evidence for people actually dying, and doctors and nurses who are usually pretty scientifically minded, they declare someone dead, it's pretty good chance that they're really dead. So 50,000 people in the United States alone have died from something they're calling the coronavirus. Is it the virus? Well, maybe, maybe not. We have to take that approach. Let's find out. Let's do some research. Let's talk to experts. Experts have more background, more education, and more evidence for believing what they believe and talking in the way they do. You can disbelieve them, but why bother? Yeah. So do you or Anodea know anyone that had coronavirus?
Yes.
Yeah. I know 5 people. It was 6, but 1 died. My brother had it, and his mother-in-law died from it.
Okay. And I know people too. And Lion, you and I both know some of the same people that have had it.
Yep.
Yeah.
And they were very, very sick and fought for their lives. And it's been 6 weeks and they're not completely recovered yet.
Wow.
Yeah, no, there's other important facts if you're going to compare coronavirus to other things. Like millions of children die of starvation every year.
Yeah.
But there's no great, huge outcry about what are we going to do to solve that problem. Hundreds of thousands of people die from drug overdoses every year.
Yeah.
There's some some movement in the political and economic system. They're now starting to nail the companies that produced it and marketed opioids. But people aren't running around tearing their hair out because people are dying from drug overdoses, except for those people who love the person who died, right? So there's a matter of scale also. Like, this is something that it seems to go across political spectrums and economic spectrums, and it doesn't matter how rich you are or how poor you are or where you live, you can be impacted by this thing. And so it brings it up in terms of the level of consciousness. Like, if poor people are dying, it's like they're over there, they're not right here.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
7 million people a year die from air pollution, which is a lot more than are going to die from coronavirus. That's globally, but that's every single year. So as we do a shutdown with less driving and flying, the air gets better. We're actually going to save more lives than we're losing from COVID, most likely, just because the air is better.
Wow. Yeah. So that was my next question, Anodea, is if coronavirus had a voice and a message, what would that be?
Well, I see this as Mother Nature, or the divine, or however you want to put it, giving us the perfect intervention in our addiction to consuming and polluting, and our waste or extractive economy, everything that we're doing wrong, basically. If there was going to be an intervention before we get to the catastrophe of climate change, which is going to be far worse than this virus, and plus, as we destroy more in the environment, we're going to get more viruses like this, that it is the perfect intervention. And she's basically saying, go to your room, think about what you've done, and sober up. So we're having a period of, the quarantine is like a sobering, like when a drug addict says, okay, I got to go off to treatment. I'm going to go sign myself into a program for 3 weeks where I can't leave and I can't go get a drink, because I'm in a program, because I can't do it on my own, right? I need the support. And then once they get enough sobriety under their belt, they can come back to civilization a little bit. Well, in the same way, I think as humanity has got to sober up from our addiction to consumption. And the message really is slow down, look at what you're doing, think about what you're doing, think about where you're going on this planet, think about what your economic system is built upon and how well it works or doesn't work. Think about your healthcare system and the flaws in that. So this virus is kind of bringing up all the flaws in, magnified for us to see. And as an intervention to help us, change the way we're living on this planet. Now, do we heed that call or not as a collective? That is the question. And I think some people really are getting this message, and some people want to get back to quote unquote normal as quickly as possible. But maybe Gaia is saying, no, this is normal. What you were doing out there, driving and flying and all that, and I've been guilty of it too, was more the abnormal. Peace and quiet is the normal. Staying at home more. Now, maybe it doesn't have to be this strict of a lockdown in the long run, but I think that the virus is here to teach us that, and that this is our chrysalis moment in the transformation from a caterpillar larval stage to a butterfly.
The great hope is that people will wake up, right? My dad quoted someone else by saying, thinking is hard, which is why so few engage in it. And so it's much easier to believe somebody or to watch TV and be fed information than it is to think for yourself. And as people stay home, they're going to start questioning, why have I been driving for an hour to go to an office in the middle of a city when I could be doing what I'm doing right now, which is working from home? And kids are going to be saying, why should I go to a school where there's 400 people in a classroom when I could be learning the same thing sitting in my living room? And it is going to change some fundamental things like the nature of work and the nature of education. It already is. So there will be some big shifts, and that might reduce air pollution, and it might reduce, being crazy, being driven crazy by our jobs or our kids. Right? So there will be changes. The thing is, nobody knows what it's going to look like on the other side of this. And as Charles Eisenstein said, I don't know, and neither do you. In fact, don't believe anybody that says they know, because nobody knows. We
Nobody
can't predict. We're in a chaotic system. We're in a liminal space, meaning between spaces, right? It's not the past anymore, but we don't know what the future is. And I don't think anyone has a clear crystal ball. However, in this space, the question is, how then shall we live? And for me, it's like, well, now we can dream and we can create the reality we want to have, rather than just be subject to the automatic machinery that's been there for decades or millennia.
Yeah, that's really well said. Yeah. So it's changing our habits. And, the chrysalis constrains your freedom. And inside the chrysalis, as the caterpillar is dissolving, all you can really feel at first is what is going away, what's losing, what's not working. And that's only part of the process. But the imaginal cells are waking up. And what Lion just said about this is our time to wake up, to imagine, to dream a new world while we have time. I mean, I've come up with things I wouldn't have come up with if I was so busy doing my other stuff, to dream a new world. That's imaginal cells imagine. That's what they do. And if we're not using our imagination to create something new, but sometimes you can't create something new when you're so busy getting reinforced by what is. And you see that reinforcement every day, and you go to work and you get it every day. You have to disengage from life as you know it to have more room and more possibility to consider something new that you don't know. And you have to go through the uncertainty and the unknowing. That's a very pregnant place. And it's important not to hurry that place. We're so addicted to wanting to know and wanting to control that we're very uncomfortable in those places, but they're very fertile. And much can come in those uncertain places if you allow it. And if you hurry it too much, you miss that opportunity for, it's like hurrying a pregnancy. Well, the baby doesn't come out right if you do that. It's got to have its organic process.
There's a very primitive belief in the brain that known is safe. If I know it, I'll be safe. And if I don't know, if I face the unknown, that's dangerous. It could be dangerous, meaning it probably will be dangerous. So get to know as quickly as possible. And what Anodea was just saying is that this is not the time to automatically go to what we know or what we want to know. And this is where conspiracy theories come in. It's like, oh, there's the explanation for the unknown.
Right.
And we have a tendency to attach on to them because it feels better to know something than to know nothing, right? Even if we're in a situation in which there is no way to know, at least I can grab onto something. This is the basis of beliefs for even a baby. It's like, well, if I stay still and don't have needs, then I'll be cared for. That's a conclusion that a baby could come to, which means that they then, for the rest of their lives, follow that rule. And so, at least knowing that, even if it's wrong, is better than not knowing and being in the anxiety.
So, Lion and Anodea, my next question is about what you feel about 5G.
Well, I'll jump in on that for a moment, because I think what Lion just said really applies to 5G. Is, what we know and what we don't know. We know that 5G is new. It's another level up from what we have. We have not had it long enough to know what the long-term effects are on the nervous system, on the cycles of nature and things like that. We haven't had it long enough, so we can't conclude that it's good or that it's not good. We can't conclude any of that because we haven't had enough time with it. Did 5G create the virus? Coronaviruses have been around for a long time. There's thousands and thousands of them, and each one is a little bit different. So there's no evidence that it did, and there's no evidence that it doesn't undermine our immune system a little bit and make us more susceptible. I think the thing is, to, like you said at first, Lion, have an open mind. I don't conclude that 5G is, beneficial to everyone necessarily. There might be nothing wrong with it. And there might be something terribly wrong with it. We just don't know yet. But there is no evidence that it actually created the virus when viruses like this come along, and it has been traced to, trapped wild animals. Now, it's been shown that the more we take away the natural environment, the more organisms, bacteria, viruses jump from the animal environment to humans. And they say that's where Lyme disease came from, for example. And that, the more we take away and bring, wild animals into human environments where they shouldn't be, the more we have a crossbreeding and more susceptible. To me, that is the most logical, plausible explanation. And I don't need to go look for something that has no evidence, to support that 5G made there's no evidence for that. And I don't say the case is closed. Someplace that has a lot of 5G towers up, that's where it started. I don't say the case is closed, but, it doesn't mean it causes it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's known that Wuhan was one of the first cities in which 5G was fully implemented, right? And that if you look at population patterns of people who are suffering from coronavirus, they tend to be in areas which have 5G. And they also tend to be in areas which are highly populated. So is it the high population density, or is it the 5G? We don't know. Both are possible. I've read a lot about 5G. Some European countries have a lot more science checking these things, and some European countries have banned 5G. Well, they banned it for a reason, not just because of rumor, but because of scientific evidence. And they're very careful about laws they pass to see whether they want something or not. So if you read European literature, there's a lot of evidence that there's some things wrong with 5G. And there's no doubt about that. In this country, who's paying the bills for our congressmen? The telecom companies. They want 5G. They're going to make a lot of money on it. So any evidence to the contrary, this is where conspiracy theory kind of gets flipped over to the other side. They say, oh, that's a conspiracy theory. There's nothing to that. Well, that's because they're using their selective evidence, right? In the same way that other people use it the other way. They're saying there's no truth to those other experiments. There was something flawed in the experiment. Well, that's just the use of the same principle the other way around. You can ignore real science, real evidence, or you can use belief as a way of ignoring the evidence. So it's very difficult. This is a tough one. And my suggestion is keep an open mind, not so open that your brains fall out, but an open mind. Accumulate evidence, read as much as you can, make your own decisions about how is this going to affect your life. Look, if you think 5G is dangerous, move to a place that's not going to get 5G for a couple of decades. Okay, if it's going to impact your life, there are some people who are highly sensitive to electromagnetic spectrum energies. My wife happens to be one of them. And so she's very sensitive and very attuned to that. So we're thinking of moving because we don't want to be in the 5G area. And our town has said no 5G. So we're protected for a while. So you have to decide for yourself what evidence you take in and what evidence you consider, and then how is it going to impact you in your personal life, and then what you're going to do about it. That's really the way to think about any conspiracy theory, rather than go and spread rumors or spread speculation and say, there's the bad guy.
Yeah.
And, we look at 5G and, like I say, we haven't had it long enough to know it could be terribly harmful. And then, as you mentioned, some European countries have banned it. It hasn't stopped them from getting coronavirus. Right. Spain, France, and Italy and the UK have had huge numbers of coronavirus. And, places in the Midwest and, we have a lot in this country and 5G is only in some places. So, it doesn't really correlate to how much virus there is or, the 5G. And that doesn't mean 5G is safe, and it doesn't mean 5G caused it. We have to, as Lion said, continue accumulating evidence and do studies over time. I just think they shouldn't be putting 5G in so quickly because there's been so little study of it,
Yeah.
And it's just kind of being we're being assaulted with it in a way, and without much choice, and people aren't very informed, and there haven't been many studies. It's like putting some drug in the water that we don't really know what it's going to do, and then finding out down the line, it changes the gene pool,
Yeah.
By the way, there have been protests against pretty much any new technology that comes in, including the telegraph.
Yeah.
And the telephone system, right? And alternating current. There have been huge protests against anything new that comes in. So this is the next new thing, and let's protest it first. And
Yeah, Lion. My 12-year-old son, he said, "Mom, when they invented the light bulb and they put all the electricity everywhere, they were afraid that was going to harm them as well. And now we just laugh about it." Wow.
Yeah. And we don't know.
Thing to say.
Yeah.
Smart kid.
He's a smart kid. He thinks it's going to be a good thing. He's one of those Mr. Smarty Pants. It makes the most sense, Mom. It's where we're headed. I'm like, okay.
I mean, you could make up a theory, and I have no evidence for this, that people created the coronavirus so that we'd all connect on Zoom, and because so many people are doing that, they need bigger bandwidth, so therefore we need 5G.
It's all
there's a theory I just made up, but
I like it. I'll spread that rumor around. That's great.
Yeah. Because we're all getting internet slow and things like that, and it's okay, see, this proves humanity, you need bigger bandwidth.
It is very interesting. Such an amazing time on the planet. So let's see, the New World Order. How about that one? What do you guys think about that? Is that a...
Yeah, so again, this word has been used by people like George Bush, as well as people in the alternative communities. So one of the great conspiracies is that the rich, powerful people are manipulating everything. Now, I've read a lot about this from journalists who have hung out at Davos and been interviewing rich, powerful people. And here's the principle. People who are rich and powerful will take advantage of any situation to become more rich and more powerful. That's all they want. That's the game they're playing. It's a different game than you and I and most of humanity. It's a different level of game. People who are billionaires are, they can't even relate to us people, little people, right? But they don't need to create a crisis to get more rich and more powerful. They can take advantage because of their wealth and their power and their reach and their information. They can take advantage of anything that happens to increase their power and their wealth. So, and also governments tend to reduce personal freedoms during a time of crisis because everybody wants control of the unknown. So let's bring in some more controls. And then, of course, when the crisis is over, we rarely get back our personal freedoms. So that's another tendency that those in power are naturally tending toward. You don't need to have a cabal of wealthy people to have those things happen. Our natural inclination for greed, accumulation, and power explain the same things.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
I think that was part of the Copernican revolution when Copernicus said that the Earth and the planets went around the sun. They had this elaborate theory beforehand about how the sun was going around the Earth and what the planets did, and they did these little curlicues and they did this and that in order to make it compute that the sun was going around the planets. And when Copernicus said, why go for a more complex explanation when a simpler, more obvious one will do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was telling my husband about one of the conspiracy theories that they're going to put the virus and the vaccines or the something, I can't remember what it was. And he says, well, if it was the richest, most powerful people in the world, couldn't they just put it in the water supply if they wanted everyone dead? I mean, what would be the point of this elaborate plan when it could just be so simple because they have so much power. And I thought, well, that makes sense. He goes, and you know, Gray, that's why he doesn't believe in conspiracy theories, is because he says it just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't add up. So
but that's using your critical thinking.
yeah.
Does this make sense? Does it make sense financially for some group of people to do this? Does it make sense for their long-term goals that this would serve them? Does it make sense? You know, so I have the same attitude about chemtrails. You know, does it make sense for the cost of flying and dropping some little tiny bit of chemical in the air? Is that serving anything? Would that be some expense that someone would go to, and for what purpose? And what does it actually do? I mean, it doesn't add up in my mind, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So with all of that, and with where we're at with the coronavirus, the pandemic, what does this mean, in your opinion, for humanity? And where do you see us going? And how can we prepare for what's in store for us for the future?
Should I jump in on that one?
Yeah.
So what does it mean for humanity? It means wake up, or this is going to get worse. It's very simple. Wake up and think about the civilization you are creating, the finite resources on the planet that you're creating it from that are running out, the global warming timetable that is, you know, could be the end of humanity if we don't, you know, if we don't do something. And so it's basically saying, look, this is what could happen. Do you want it to get worse than this? Then take the medicine of silence, take the medicine of reflection, take the medicine of stillness, take the medicine of sobering up. And that is how we may begin to get well as a civilization, because we've been ill. We're feeding ourselves poison in the form of fake news. We're feeding ourselves, you know, we're, like I say, addicted to consumption. We need to get well. And this is a teaching, if we can learn the teaching. And if not, there will be worse things to come. There's viruses and bacteria in the ice from hundreds of thousands of years ago that when the ice melts, we'll get in the water supply. We have no antibodies for that because humans haven't seen it in any of our history for millennia. There's so many people are going to starve to death because we can't grow enough food if temperatures go too high. I mean, the disasters that are looming are going to make this seem like kindergarten. But we have an opportunity with this intervention from the divine, if you will, to take stock of what we're doing and implement some huge changes. And we are in the process of the undoing and the doing. And I think one thing is, you know, it's showing that capitalism, as it's structured right now, has some immense flaws. Now, that doesn't mean all capitalism is bad, but it means the way we do it has to come into question. Charles Eisenstein, you quoted him earlier, but he said, people can more easily imagine the end of the world than they can imagine the end of capitalism. You know, we say, oh, well, that's just the way it's going. So I guess we're just going to, you know, fry. I guess we're just going to cook ourselves to death and burn our forests and all that because we can't change what we're doing. Well, this virus is showing we can change.
So in a way, it almost feels like this virus is our medicine.
Yeah.
Wow.
When you asked what does it mean, my answer is I don't know, and neither do you, and neither does anyone else. But Anodea has the best explanation I've heard, and I want to vote for Anodea for president of the United States.
I so agree, Lion. You know, I was going to say, Anodea, will you run for president, please?
Please.
I'm going to shout out to my closet for that, and I'm a terrible administrator.
You can hire those people.
I'll continue to be a spokesperson. I'll continue to be a spokesperson.
Run. I'll vote for you.
Yeah. They don't vote for Marianne Williamson. They're not going to vote for me.
I love that, though. It takes all the victim mentality out of it. Just like that. Boom. And that just, for me, that grounds my energy, and it makes me feel like, all right, the power is within each and every one of us, and we all can make a difference, and we can create the reality, in which we want to create. And I love that.
Yes, and we can create our personal reality, which is our feelings, our experiences, our immediate environment. To create in a social environment, to change capitalism or to change politics, it requires action. It requires social action. It requires protests and voting and the things that change political systems or economic systems. So we have our own universe, our own personal universe. We have our immediate social universe, but then we need to take social action, political action to move the political and economic world.
Yeah. So how can we do that as individuals? And this is a big question as well, but this is where people are getting stuck. They want to do something, they just don't know what to do.
Get involved with an organization that believes what you believe and wants what you want. And then say, how can I help? How can I help raise money? How can I take action and get involved?
Right. And how about you, Anodea?
Allow your own transformation to take place. This is a gift, a time when you aren't running around or you're not going to work or you have time with your kids, or, it's a very precious gift. And use that gift for, maybe upping your spiritual practice or, cleaning up, zenning up your house, cleaning out your closets. And, we call it sharpening the saw, that any craftsman has to take time off from work every so often to sharpen his tools, right? Mm-hmm. So this is a time for sharpening the saw, for getting your office more organized, for, creating something that you haven't had time to do, for cleaning up something, for organizing something. At Google, they started giving people Fridays off. You would come to work, but you had no assigned task. You were off duty from whatever you were working on, and they did this every Friday. And they just wanted to see what people would do if they were at the office but had free time. And so they had coffee clutches with each other, and they came up with new ideas, and they said, oh yeah, I've been wanting to fix that bug in that program forever. I'm going to do that. And they had more creative solutions coming out of that day off than they did with anything else. So they kept the Friday off, come to work Fridays, and people loved it because they were freed up. And, I found myself freed up to, do some research on economics and write on that, something I wouldn't have had time to do otherwise. So let's use this as the gift it is for our personal transformation. And then when we come out, take the social action. When we can come out and intermingle and all that, take the social action that comes from our change in consciousness.
Beautiful.
Beautifully said. Aw, thank you. Is there any last words that you would like to add before we wrap it up?
It's so fun to do this with you, Lion, again.
It is great. It's really great.
And thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. My last words are what we said.
Well, thank you so much, Lion and Anodea. You're two of the smartest people I know. So thank you so much for joining me today. And love you both. Anodea, I'll let you get back to your gardening. And Lion, I'll see you in a few days. Namaste.
Yes.